It is Friday, oh God. See, this one mine is it is July 17th of 2020. It's actually a beautiful day out, and it's a beautiful day to have somebody who's a generally beautiful person on the inside and out. She is a wonderful, wonderful therapist. I don't even know how many accolades to give her. You've probably seen her on your social media feed pop up because she's pretty much like owning that lane on Instagram of being the therapist that people want to talk to about everything. She's been featured on basically whoever your favorite is. She's been on either Instagram Live or their stories or their conversations. To give her an introduction would be an injustice. I'll let her explain who she is, but her name is Dr. Ayanna Abrams. She's somebody I actually know in real life, and I'm always proud to talk about her. And so, Ayanna, without any further ado, let the people know who you are.
I like that introduction though. I could roll with that one.
All right, hey, that works in too.
I am Dr. Ayanna Abrams. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist based in Atlanta, Georgia. I am the founder and director of a solo mental health practice called Ascension Behavioral Health, where I work with individuals, couples, and groups. My main focus in my practice is Black mental health. So I work with a lot of Black people and Black couples and offering them and providing them culturally responsive care with specifics towards racism-based trauma, how to navigate that in the workplace, in the school space, in the grocery store, in your families, but also people who show up with mood disorders, anxiety, depressive symptoms, bipolar disorder. And I have a huge focus on healthy relationships. So assertiveness, boundaried communication, how to get your needs met in your relationships. And I work a lot and partner a lot with organizations in order to normalize a conversation about mental health and help to destigmatize getting therapy.
All right, now you see why I said it's hard to give her an introduction because you're generally wonderful. And so I actually met Ayanna through running first, and so that's kind of how we met. And it's always been cool just to still be in her presence because she's honestly more wonderful in person than she is online. So
are you still running?
I'm not running as much because I tore my calf, so I'm riding a bike a lot more. So okay. I'm actually gonna go do a little running this afternoon and see how it goes.
I ain't been doing nothing, but that's not what we're here for.
Right. Well, we'll get to that. So I want to actually ask you in particular, so why in particular did you get into mental health? Because a lot of people would just say, you could pick anything, why mental health?
Yeah, it's been a long journey for me. I would say that I started my career in mental health in high school when I really fell into psychology. And I had a psychology class in my senior year of high school, and we watched a movie called Pay It Forward with Haley Joel Osment. And previous to that, I wanted to be a teacher. So I always knew I wanted to be in some space where I'm helping or serving and just kind of helping people access something greater, right, that they needed. But I didn't know about psychology and mental health until then. I saw this movie and I just felt an urge to want to help that family. The mom was so sad. The son was so sad.
Yeah.
All this stuff. So I went to college and majored in psychology and had a double major in African American studies and thought that I wanted to work with children and families. Got to graduate school with a plan to focus on child and adolescent psychology. Had my first, kind of year-long fieldwork experience working with children. I was just like, never mind.
Okay.
To do and then switched my focus over to adult mental health, college mental health, and couples and relationships and families and how we operate as individuals as it relates to all these different systems that we're in, right? Family systems, community systems, religious systems, political systems, and just how to see somebody and help them to exist in all of their identities in the world. So.
Okay. I like that. And the reason why I brought that up is because I think now, especially, just no one's lived on a rock right now. We know the world is going through some really interesting times right now. And a lot of people are more talking about mental health now than I think I've ever seen. Maybe that's just me and my timeline necessarily, but I've seen a lot. Yeah, there has been a move. And so I want to ask you about that in particular, on your side, the professional side, have you seen a bigger increase in people just hitting you up for things, or just what have you been seeing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
since entering the field in kind of my stage, I recognize that older clinicians, this is even less familiar for them,
Oh,
but
okay.
lots more conversations about mental health, lots more conversations about therapy, lots more conversations about looking for different ways to become healthy, and again, kind of destigmatizing therapy as a means to just kind of access additional support. So I have loved seeing that there is much more conversation around it, even specifically to communities of color, and even more specific to the Black community, to offer ourselves what we do deserve, right, in terms of any resources that are available for us to be our best selves and to heal from a lot of traumas that have happened in our past. What we also notice with that is that mental health has become its own trend. So also being mindful of, what mental health advocacy looks like,
Okay.
and who is offering real information, right, that is consistent, that is expert, that is helpful, versus some other ways in which people are having conversations about mental health. But we're seeing it on all the news feeds. It's, talked about in schools more. It's talked about in the home more. It's talked about with younger children more. So that only in general has much more of a benefit for us overall. But I can understand, like, seeing through your feeds that
Yeah.
you're hearing just a lot more about not only the benefits of mental health, but we're also learning or hearing a lot more about traumas and suicides and pains. So being able to kind of balance that out with offering people ways to help themselves.
Yeah, like what was it? The trending topic this morning. I hope it's okay, and I hope it's not true that Tamar Braxton attempted suicide this morning. And so, I got to ask you in regards to that.
Well, just even to add to that, unfortunately,
Yeah,
that's been the way in which mental health has become more of a topic, is that we are seeing more tragedies. We are
yeah,
seeing more pain in news cycles. So it's oftentimes that's been the route into talking more about mental health. Really bad things happen, and then people are just like, oh, well, what was going on with them? What did they need that they didn't get? And now we're talking more to therapists about that.
yeah. So, okay, I want to ask you two things about that, if you don't mind. They're kind of a little, yeah. Okay, so I want to ask in particular. Um, this notion of celebrity in particular, when a celebrity does something like that's very traumatic like that, and you see how people react to it, like what is going on when you that I because I don't have the words for it, but what is going on when that phenomenon is happening?
I think it's a mix of different things. I think there are ways in which we have assumptions about people with money, or people who live certain places, or people who, from what we think we understand, have lived certain lives. That for a lot of people, it's a shock that they are in pain or in that much pain, or even could consider those things. And it actually really offers a conversation about how mental health issues don't discriminate, right, based
Yeah.
on money, again, are based on zip code or based on bank account, right? That those are not things that buffer you from having mental health issues. While they might do is provide you more access to resources, it doesn't buffer you from pain in your life. It doesn't buffer you from people hurting you. It doesn't buffer you from things that were not in your control happening to you. So one, it offers a conversation about that. And it can resonate with a lot of people because, again, there's ways in which we separate ourselves from celebrity, and recognizing that everybody experiences pain on whatever spectrum. So I think it does offer more of a realistic conversation about people just being human, versus these categories that we put people in. When it comes to, I think, in offering the racial or the ethnic kind of cultural piece about when we see Black people in the media, who either have suicide attempts or have killed themselves, it creates this other conversation that actually kind of harkens back to the stigma about what we tend to believe about who does these things,
Right.
about who would consider these things. And oftentimes there's a defensiveness or a denial that is something that happens to us, or that is what we do with our pain. And what some of these narratives have offered is a way to help people understand that, yeah, we are also in excruciating pain, and that there is an increase in suicide attempts and suicides by Black people, regardless of celebrity.
Right. Okay. And I know this is something we didn't necessarily have prep questions for, but I just want to kind of get into that for a half a second, which is I I've noticed that more, that just a lot, not in addition just people talking about mental health, but just like you said, Black people either completing suicide or committing suicide. And what do you want to say to people who have a hard time understanding that that's a thing that Black people actually do? Because I've talked to some older Black people and they say, well, we don't commit suicide. Like that's just not something we do, and that's something it has to be, they come up with some weird theory or whatever. But like, what do you say to that
Yeah. I
particularly?
mean, I recognize that it's difficult for people to confront or reconcile, because it means that you would need to, integrate or be open to that kind of pain, right? And that kind of pain process. There are very nuanced ways that, particularly for Black people, that our culture and our religion oftentimes serves as a buffer for us, where at one point it was thought that we are less likely to engage and kind of have pain in these ways because we have community in these ways. We have
Mhm.
family, we have our faith, right, to be able to buffer and quote unquote separate ourselves from white people's issues. What we are noticing now is at the same time that those can be the same spaces, right, that have traumatized us. Right, those can be the same spaces that are very, very harmful to us, and being able to understand that and to disengage from the defensiveness around what we do or what we don't do makes it really hard for people to believe that we're also afflicted in these same ways because we are human. So I think we're again, as we see more painful stories, like this that are highlighted in these ways, all you can do is offer those people the truth about this does happen. You can't convince people of anything. You can't make them or kind of force them to believe that that is real and true. But typically that's people engaging in their defenses, right? We don't do that. We go to church. We don't
Mhm.
do it that way. We only do it this way. A lot of times that's lack of information. And oftentimes, again, it is just this denial, because if that were to be true, then it might kind of strip us of a whole bunch of other things that we believed. And that's hard for people.
You hit the nail on the head, and like this is why they pay you the big bucks because yeah, because I never, you say the things that I'm not knowing to say, or the question I didn't know to ask. And so the second part to that is, I kind of mentioned this to you prior to us doing the interview, which is, well, in the questions anyway, which is, um, there's the sense of protest that's going on right now is essentially a lot of people being fed up, and a lot of people fed up in particular about injustice. But very, very, very specifically, there was a clip I want to refer to from Cardi B. I don't know if you saw it a few weeks ago.
I probably didn't.
Okay, so it was probably like 6 weeks ago. It was right around the time when the George Floyd protests first started.
Okay.
And so she just got on a rant. Somebody stated on Instagram Live, and she just was saying basically, and I forgot about how young she is, but she's like, listen, I'm 25. I've seen people die on the internet for the last 10 years of my life. People are fed up. And so what do you say to people like that who essentially have grown up seeing just like these type of very traumatic incidents now for like the last decade of their life? And so that's something I haven't seen anybody really address yet, with the mental health of just seeing people die constantly
Yeah.
online.
And that in and of itself is a trauma, right? That Black people do not have the luxury or the privilege of separating ourselves from some of those images, from some of those images. And our psyches really aren't made to hold, right, repeated trauma after trauma
Mhm.
after trauma after trauma. So on the one hand, we notice that some people become more desensitized to it. They are just sharing videos, posting about stuff, talking about stuff, but they're not emotionally connected to it. And a lot of us, and on the other hand, a lot of us are really activated by it, right? So even if we don't experience this, visceral response in the moment, those images stay in our minds. Those images kind of live in our bodies in the way where, we feel more anxious when we leave the house. We feel more anxious when we are in large, crowded spaces. I personally feel more anxious when, I know that my partner has left the house, because again, him as a Black man driving around, I can't help but have these thoughts about what might be happening with him and if I can or cannot get to him. So all these things are things that absolutely impact our mental health, right? It can be distracting for us. Our body is kind of always in this sense of like a fight or a flight response, right? Our stress
Yeah.
response. And that creates wear and tear on other systems in our body, right? So when we talk
Mhm.
about, hypertension, when we talk about hypertension, blood pressure, cardiac, issues, all of these things play a role. So when you are engaging in or kind of witnessing trauma minute after minute, hour after hour, on the news cycle, or kind of scrolling your social media, being really mindful of how much you are taking in. And that's where we need to have some more boundaries, right, around what we are seeing, what we're talking about, what we're sharing, and how we're balancing that with spaces that we find joy in, that we feel affirmed, that we feel loved and cared for, that we feel, safe and protected in. We've got to offer ourselves more of those spaces, because the news is going to be with the news.
Yeah. Right.
It's
And
impossible.
so,
It's a hard line to draw, right, of being informed versus being overstimulated and traumatized.
right. And so I actually want to ask you about this. So in particular, do you have any tips or things that people could be doing when they kind of just don't want to keep absorbing these traumatic things that don't like because they're just too connected to online and it's just like causing like a real negative effect in their life?
Yeah. I think the first step is listening to your body, right? That
Mhm.
each of us hold information in different ways. So if you do not feel like you are, deeply, deeply affected by it, then whatever's working for you, work for you. But paying attention to if you notice that you feel more anxious while you're scrolling, if you notice that you feel tension in your body, right, while you're scrolling, if you find that the first thing you do in the morning is, go to news cycles and just hear other people's stories or hear stories of pain the first thing that you wake up, or you're scrolling right before you go to bed and you're kind of coming across images and stories of white racism and kind of Karen's gone wild, if you're taking in all of that stuff
Yeah.
right before you go to bed, that those things sit in your subconscious, right? So
Mm.
even if you're not actively thinking about them and applying them, they're right there under the surface, and they're connecting to how you are operating right in the world. So really having different ways in which you set up when and how you're going to take in news. Like for
Mm.
instance, I have switched that I don't really take in a lot of, or I try my best to not take in a lot of news through social media or watching like MSNBC or something like that, because it's a lot of visual stimulation. I'm hearing people's, words. I'm seeing people's faces. I'm seeing, coronavirus statistics. I'm seeing, bodies, right? Black bodies, traumatized, being, harmed in these ways. It's healthier for me to take in news when I'm just reading words, right? So having my, 2 to 3 news sources, right, that I go to for accurate, objective information. That's all I need to know. If I
Yeah.
know what's in the Washington Post and they've given me this information here, I don't need to watch a Trump news conference, right? So me being able to kind of buffer what I'm taking in, because when you're watching the news, remember, you are seeing 2 to 5 people on a screen talk about a
Mhm.
whole bunch of stuff. You're seeing statistics on the side of them. You're seeing a marquee at the bottom, right, with all of this stuff. It is just overstimulation, and your brain, um, it can burn you out just by taking. And imagine if you're doing that hours throughout the day.
Right. Oh, so that actually brought me something else, which is kind of related, but I'm just going to ask you as well, which is, uh, you help me on this one. All right. So, in regards to doing this, let's say I do all the things you just tell me. All
Mhm.
right. So I'm still doing that, and I go out in the real world, and I see something that triggered me in the online world. Like, what do I do at that point if I see something that could trigger me like that?
What do you mean you got out in the real world and
Yeah,
something?
let's say that we see a Karen do something crazy in public, like she spits on groceries or something. Like, what would be your thing then?
Yeah, I think that is also nuanced. It depends on if you how unsafe you feel in that moment. It depends on if it's something
Mm,
that feels like a direct threat to you. So if you are engaging with somebody who is um, promoting or exhibiting a racist act versus seeing it happen over there. I know a lot of people, and recognizing that with technology, right? So when there are cameras and filming, right, all these ways.
yeah,
That it feels really important to be able to kind of catch what's going on, but you have to listen to your body and your system, right? So akin to, ways in which people are trying to figure out how to be activists, right? You got to listen to your body. You have to know what is right and what is best for you, right? There are going to be some people who can protest in that way. There are going to be some people who will be on the front lines in those ways, and they are, getting arrested and they're reporting about it, right? There will be people who are in the newsrooms, right? That is their form of activism. There are people who, might not feel as comfortable doing that based on their anxiety, based on health conditions, based on region, anything like that. They will, offer activism through funding, right? They will make sure that these programs are supported in funding. Other people are activists by providing accurate information, right? And making sure that people are helped that way. Other people provide legal consultation, like whatever the things are for you, it all reflects back into listening to your body as the source, right? In terms of what can I identify as my role to engage in something that feels empowering and autonomous for me, right? What that also looks like is, hey, at this time, if the most you can do is stay home and access some level of safety and love, that's also activism. You do
yeah,
not have to be out there doing anything. You don't have to be out there in a way putting what seemingly for you might feel like putting yourself in more danger, particularly as a Black person when we are already in danger. If you want to stay home and love up on yourself, that's also a form of activism, and I absolutely encourage that. But you don't
okay.
have to Karens. You don't have to video her.
Yeah.
You don't have to, do anything if you don't want to do anything with her.
Right. And you mentioned something I kind of wanted to segue to as well, which is, in particular, you do a lot of this on your Instagram account, which is I really love. You talk to people about things they could be doing. You have conversation with basically the entire internet at this point about what to do.
The entire internet. I do
Yeah,
Instagram.
you really do. You really do. But I want to ask you in particular. All right, because you mentioned this thing about love, right? So you mentioned love. And so this is going to sound really weird, but hear me out. What does it mean to love yourself in the age of quarantine?
Mm. So, what love can look like for you is rest, right? Taking a break from your normal routine of doing all the things, being all the things, just saying all the things, listening all the things. It can be rest. It can be talking to people who you find encouraging. It can be watching something that feels funny or soothing or encouraging. It can be coloring, right? It can be, being on your phone and connecting with people and scheduling Zoom calls and,
Hmm.
coffee over Zoom, right? As you get to know people who you don't know, right? Who want to reach out to you. It is a very nuanced and unique definition of it. But love in that way, or quote unquote self-love in that way, offering yourself the space to make those choices for yourself versus being demanded upon, versus being obligated to do something else. It's giving yourself back that autonomous choice of what I'm doing in this moment gives me room, gives me breath, gives me excitement, gives me encouragement, gives me, motivation. That is what self-love can look like for you.
Okay. Okay. Now I want to ask you in particular, not just about self-love, but this notion of self-care, because pre-COVID, people were either being, the definition of self-care, I feel like, I don't know what your definition is, but I've seen at least 100 different versions of that. So what does that actually mean?
And I think I like the 100 different definitions of it, because what that says to me is that people are finally beginning to define it for themselves,
Okay.
right? My version of self-care, self-love, whatever it is going to look very different from yours, and that's okay. Right. I also recognize that self-care in of itself is becoming super commodified. It's getting kind of
Yes.
swept into this, wellness industry, all that stuff. And what I've always offered in terms of self-care, that it's not just about luxury and things that make you feel good and pleasant all the time. It's also about responsibility, right? It's also about, taking care of the things that allow you to feel like a resource in life, taking care of things that allow you to feel whole, taking care of things that help you minimize your anxiety. So, for example, self-love is, self-care is getting your finances together, right? Learning more information about, gaining financial literacy and, talking to one other person in your life who you don't talk to finances about. Self-care for me looks like setting boundaries at night and taking my behind to bed, right?
Okay.
Like the
Yeah.
fun stuff. And self-care is
Yeah.
not necessarily about spas and vacations and
Okay.
bottles, right? That
Right.
can be a form of self-care, but that is, you only receive the full benefits of that when you're taking care of the basics. So for me,
I
it's
like
going
that.
down to the basics of what are the things that allow me to move through the day and feel like I am contributing as a, citizen to the world, that I'm taking care of myself, that I am a part of things that feel purposeful and meaningful to me. That is also part of your self-care. Depending on the level of functioning of my client, self-care for them looks like, us talking about, hey, did you shower today? Did you wash your hair? Have you
That's real.
brushed your teeth today? Right? Depending on their level of depressive symptoms or anxiety. I'm not even talking about you paying a bill. We're not there. I'm talking to you about, are you taking care of your organ? Are you taking care of your skin? Right? Are you taking care of yourself in these ways that allow you to feel connected to the world? Right? So it really depends on where you are, kind of what your functioning is. That's how you decide what your self-care needs to look like. And that can change day to day.
Okay. And I'm glad you brought that up, because one of the questions I had was, uh, how, okay, it's the same question, but on two different perspectives. One, okay, so how would you, as Dr. Ayanna, treat someone with anxiety? And then how should somebody who can't get to Dr. Ayanna deal with anxiety?
Um, what I always say in a lot of these interviews is that it's a gift and a curse. That my easy answer to everything is that it depends. And
Okay, fair enough.
hard answer to everything is that it depends, because anxiety manifests in different ways. So if I have clients who are showing up to me and their anxiety manifests as insomnia, right? Then we're looking at a sleep hygiene plan. I'm looking at what's happening as you're winding down your day, what's going on. Is it kind of, disjointed through the night? Are we looking at you getting a sleep aid? Are we looking at you not drinking soda at 10 o'clock p.m., right? So if your anxiety shows up like that, then we address it like that. If your anxiety shows up where you cannot function at work, right, because you are too nervous about sending an email or saying the wrong thing, then we're engaging in different work around that, right? We're engaging in, maybe narratives that you have about yourself feeling inadequate, right? Or imposter phenomenon that's showing up at work. That's a different conversation about how your anxiety shows up. If your anxiety shows up because you have been traumatized in your past by women, right? So you have a hard time being around women, or you are someone who wants to be in a relationship with a woman, but all you can think about is this awful thing that happened to you when you were 8, then we're talking about that, right? So it really depends on everyone's unique story, which is why one of the modes of therapy that I offer, or even more specifically for my Black clients, is called narrative therapy, where we're really focused on what stories you have about yourself and being able to re-empower you to be the author of those stories, versus a lot of us live lives where other people have told stories about us, right? So we're so to what our parents have said about us. We're so used to what our teachers have said about us. We're so used to what our partners have said about us that we've lost our own narrative, right? So my goal with you then would be to give you back the power to tell your story in your words, and you might notice your anxiety dissipate.
Right? I like that. Okay.
It really depends on, again, kind of how it's presenting, how old you are, how it's impacting your life, and then we do work from there. Anxiety in and of itself is appropriate, it is normal, it's natural, it's common, it's not a quote unquote bad thing. We're looking at an anxiety disorder when it crosses the threshold and now it's getting in the way of your functioning. But everyone has anxiety, right? Anxiety at a base level means that you are having a physiological response to something in your environment that feels like you need to respond to it. All right.
I'm glad you actually said that, because even myself, I thought I was a learned guy, but I never knew anxiety was like a natural thing. I just thought that was only because of negativity that something like that could arise.
Anxiety comes up oftentimes with something that feels important to you, right? So I might have anxiety about jumping on this call, right? Because you are somebody who I value, and I want to make sure that I offer.
She's buttering me up.
I want to make sure that I offer you, a conversation that feels really fruitful and really meaningful, right? So I can experience a little bit of anxiety. So I'm looking at the questions and making sure, like, okay, you got to know what misnomer means. Like, so I'm like moving through this, right? I can feel a little bit of anxiety around that, right? If the anxiety was showing up in a way where I canceled this call because I couldn't do it, I was too worried about saying the wrong thing. If anxiety shows up here to where I am stuttering so much, right, that I'm not even coherent in this, then that's something that's impacting my functioning. That might be something I want to go and talk to somebody about.
I like this. Okay. So now we're not gonna look at any more questions. I don't want to have any more misnomers out there about
But you
that.
also mentioned the question about, what if people notice some of these symptoms and they can't make it to
you? Yes.
So what I can really appreciate, you got to pay attention to the thresholds of social media, is that there are so many mental health advocates and therapists and psychologists who are on social media now, that a lot of people are getting a lot of resources and education about how anxiety can show up for them, right? So there's much more access to information about mental health concerns now than there was, I want to say, 2 years ago. Like, therapists are all over the gram, and
y'all be on the streets, man. Y'all be out here.
So there's much more education around it that doesn't feel like it's behind the closed door or the barrier of being in a therapy room, that's the only people who could get help. So I love that. But at the same time, wanting to recognize that an Instagram infographic is not the work. You can recognize stuff and kind of put it together, and it resonate with you. And a lot of what we say is going to resonate with you because we're talking about human conditions.
Right.
But you have to determine and kind of have the wherewithal and the insight to say, oh, this is actually getting in the way of my functioning. What are some things that I can do about that? Namely, improving sleep, improving nutrition, and improving what your relationships look like can minimize a lot of anxiety.
Okay, so this is the only time I was going to use the misnomer part of it, which was, all right, because you kind of walked into it, so I got to just throw out the misnomers. All right, this is pretty straightforward. All right, so it's going to be about misnomers, about getting therapy. But before that, the narrative, I want to go back for a second. The narrative therapy, is that solely for Black people? Like if my friend is white, can he come and do it too? Or you have
Oh
to
yeah,
only,
yeah.
okay, okay.
I think that it is one of the more culturally responsive ways to meet Black people where they are in therapy, because therapy is oftentimes mostly with white therapists. So it's a
Got
way
you.
to empower somebody in their story versus me telling you how you feel and what your diagnosis is, and that's not what we're here for.
Okay. And so, all right. So, no,
You
you
can
got me. You got me. Okay. So I gotta
help
say,
the therapist if they understand that or if they use that technique.
got you. Okay. So now I want to ask misnomers about therapy, or therapy or mental health. Just like you want to just expel the people right now.
Yeah. So some quick ones. People think that it is only for people who are weak. People think that we are in there to give you advice and to tell you what to do in your life. I've had people say to me that, yeah, I don't need to go to therapy because I don't need to pay for a friend. Like I'm not one of your little friends
Yeah.
either. This
Right.
is a
Right.
relationship, and it is a relationship. Therapy is rooted in the actual relationship between you and a therapist, and the greatest marker of change is how safe you feel with me. It's not about how smart I am. It's not about the
Okay.
mode. Like all that is important, but the greatest marker of change, and we've got research that backs it, we've got narratives that back that, is how safe you feel to be your authentic self in the room. How intimate this space can feel for you, to be able to engage in a different practice outside. I can give you all the different tools and tricks and all the different things to do, but if you don't trust our relationship, you're not going to change your sleep patterns. You're not going to believe in the work, right? So a
Right.
lot of work is about making this relationship safe, and showing up as a person who you can be very vulnerable with, showing up as a person who you can say the things you've never said to other people, in this space, so that you can build some confidence and kind of release some of the shame that you have about stuff. So yeah, so therapy is about the relationship. Therapy is not a white people thing or a white women's
Yeah. Yeah.
thing. It is for everyone, but I also recognize the barriers to that in terms of what people assume about cost, or what people just have access to in those ways. Nothing mysterious happens back here. It's confidential, right? So no one else is allowed in the space. But I'm not doing any, psych tricks on you in
Okay.
any way. And that you also get to ask me questions, right? You get to establish, or I will determine what doesn't feel appropriate, right? But you get to establish
Right.
full and a deep relationship with me, where I'm not just here to tell you what to do. And it's a relationship that you also have to put in some work, right? To trust and to build and to show up for it. Don't ghost us.
Okay.
No, don't come in here being disrespectful because you can just say whatever you want to me because you can't. Right. So these are different, right? I'm
Okay.
person,
I,
right?
I, hey, I listen. Don't let the doctor put hands on y'all. Like just it's Friday. Don't let this happen. That's
Help me help you.
right.
Help me.
Help. Right. Right. And so, actually, I want to ask you that. All right. So, one thing in particular, and then I got to ask you something about actually finding happiness. But before we get to that, sometimes the road to happiness comes from within your own home. Sometimes these are people either you have chosen to be with, like a boyfriend or a spouse or a girlfriend, or people who you haven't, like your family or something like that. So, what do you want to say to people right now who could use some tips of any type to deal with, like, just living in the room with other people for a
Mm,
while?
I thought you mean in terms of like the pandemic.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So, what's been really helpful for people, and it is still a practice and it's new for a lot of people, is that even though you're in the space with other people, you still get to have time to yourself. You still get to set boundaries. You still get to ask for your needs to be met. We are all in our unique ways navigating the trauma of all of this, and things are getting revealed that maybe you didn't even know about yourself, right? And how you respond to grief, right? And how you respond to things being taken away from you, how you respond to fear, right, of becoming sick or a loved one becoming sick. So we're seeing a lot of things, or we're learning a lot of things that maybe we didn't know about our partners, about our parents, about our, loved ones who we're staying with, about our children in these spaces. And what I'd recommend, or what I'd offer, is that this is an opportunity for a lot of curiosity. And curiosity is different from judgment, right? A lot of what's happening is that people are just like, I didn't know you were like that. I didn't know you did that thing. I didn't know
Right.
you so loud, because I mean, I'm only here, one night a week, and now I'm here like all the time because we've decided to quarantine together. And just engaging in some curiosity around like, oh, I learned something new about you, right? I didn't know that thing, right? And now I know this about you. Where can I meet that in the middle? Versus kind of staying rigid in how you thought that you knew people. Not making, very rash decisions during this time, because again, people are processing their trauma in whichever way. And this is, none of us know how to do a pandemic.
Good
So
point.
you can't really expect people to respond only in the ways in which you knew them before, because this is unlike anything we've ever experienced. So if you see new things about someone, check in with them. Hey, I haven't seen you, this stressed about going to work, about having a meeting, on Wednesdays. Like, what's that about for you? Versus like, why are you getting so stressed? It's just Wednesday. You didn't
Right,
get stressed.
right.
Like, what's different about Wednesday? And it's like, yeah, it's Wednesday in month 4 of a pandemic, right? It's very, very different circumstances. So being able to offer yourself and other people grace and compassion around how difficult this is in whatever ways, and offering some room to talk to people about that versus telling them how they should be feeling or telling them what they should be doing about that, I think can go a much longer way than forcing people into a box of how they should be responding or what they should be doing with it.
Okay, I like that. Okay, so now I want to ask you something in particular, which is this is like kind of just like on the more. It's gonna sound weird. I just gotta ask it. How how does someone either find or maintain their happiness during all of this?
Um, I'd probably offer a release from finding or maintaining happiness. That might not be the goal, and I think
Okay.
oftentimes people look for that because we're also in a world that, or a system or a society that has a hard time managing distress and kind of tolerating distress. So I see a lot of positive vibes only, and how do I stay happy? And happiness is not I guess I don't view happiness as a destination, but being able to allow yourself to kind of ebb and flow and kind of get back to that, but
Mm,
also know that because you are human, you will not always be happy. I think a lot of anxiety, if not a lot of depressive symptoms and a lot of relationship issues, come from trying to force this stability of happiness onto it. And when you talk to people who are healthier or kind of more content in their relationships, or have more longevity and kind of depth in their relationships, they don't talk about making sure that everything's happy all the time. They talk about making sure that it's real. They
yeah.
talk about making sure that it's authentic and that I can tell you the truth. And that even if we're not happy now, I know that we are building the skills to get back to that at some point. But I also know that because we're human, this is going to come with some times that don't feel too happy. But can I trust you and can I love you to work with me to get back to that? All
I
right.
like
And
that.
am I building the skills? Am I building the personal individual skills that I can do some of the things that get me closer to happiness, but I am not forcing myself to stay there because I know it's not real in that way, right? I know that because I am human, I get to feel sad. I know that because I'm human, I get to feel mad at you about something and still love you, right? So that's where we look at a lot more emotional intelligence and kind of emotional maturity and agility. And again, and when you talk to people who are have more higher emotional intelligence and more flexibility emotionally, they're not talking about happiness, all right? They're talking about reality.
I like that. Okay, and so, gosh, you're good at this. Like, you really are. You really are. So I want to ask you in particular. So because this came in my head, I thought I wasn't gonna ask like a more negative question, but
That's low.
I know this is y'all. She's wonderful. I can't say this enough, but this question in particular is about anger. So one of the things I've noticed too is that there's a lot of people angry, even myself sometimes. I just catch myself being angry for no reason. Like this morning I was like, no, yesterday morning I was angry. I was like, why am I so angry? And so
Mm-hmm.
like, and then it was like something stupid too. I think I like dropped some cereal. Like it was like nothing. So like, what do you say to people who have like some version of anger like during this time?
Yeah. I think what I can offer about anger is again helping people understand or dispel that anger is an emotion that is natural and normal and common, and anger is very useful for us once we understand what it is and how to use it. That feeling angry is different from engaging in angry behaviors. Feeling
Okay.
angry is different than being hostile. right? Feeling angry is different than being irritable towards people, right? That anger in and of itself, objectively, is actually one of the emotions that we use to get our needs met, right? That when I
Huh.
feel angry about something, that tells me that something in my environment is not the way in which I need it to be, right? And that anger is oftentimes an umbrella term, right? So we use
Ah.
angry, right? We use the word anger or kind of angry because oftentimes we don't have the language under it. So when I'm unpacking anger, when I'm unpacking rage, right, with a lot of clients, what they're talking about under that is being really disappointed in someone or being really disappointed in themselves, right? When we're talking about anger, what's under that is sadness, right? Somebody hurt my feelings, all right. And because it feels too vulnerable to talk about hurt feelings, I'm gonna just get mad at you. And then with my anger, I will do something to try to harm you, to hurt your feelings, to talk bad about you, to cut you off. Um, Instead of saying that I'm feeling really betrayed by you, I'm just gonna be angry and do something to get you back. Right. So anger is oftentimes what we call on the psychological end a secondary emotion.
Huh.
And it's a mask for a lot of primary deep emotion that we're not taught, right, how to have language for, and we're not taught how to tolerate it better. So we go to anger.
My goodness, this is why you're the best at what you do. I like that. I like that. Okay, so actually now I want to open up the floor for you in particular. So is there anything you want people to know about you and what you're doing right now?
I got a lot of things in the works.
I
Um,
obviously, yeah, her gram is popping, y'all. Y'all really need to check it out. It's popping.
um, so on the one hand, while I have essential behavioral health, which is again where I see individuals, couples, groups, I have a consultation arm where I speak with organizations about mental health. More recently, I've been speaking to a lot of organizations and connecting with communities about racism-based or racism-induced trauma, vicarious trauma, how that shows up. That's what I meant to mention before. That even if you are not the person who has been physically harmed, in watching images, you can still have a very visceral response to it. And that is absolutely natural and normal, and a common response when we witness things that are really painful to happen. So you can also be traumatized even if your body is safe, physically safe in that moment. So yes, I offer a lot of consultation to organizations, podcasts, groups, all the stuff. And I also have another arm that I've started with my best friend and colleague, who's a psychiatrist up in Charlottesville. We have a company called Not So Strong. And in this company, we focus on helping Black women to practice vulnerability in order to, one, improve their mental health, right? So when you decrease shame, you increase confidence, you increase self-esteem, and it makes you more likely to get your needs met in relationships. So we offer Black women spaces to learn more about vulnerability and actually put it in practice in a way that is culturally responsive to us, right? So there's like Brene Brown, vulnerability, shame,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
that,
yeah, yeah.
but she can't speak to the Black experience, right, of how shame and vulnerability and imposter, right, stuff show up. So with that, we have an event coming up next Saturday called Bravery in Black. And in this event, we're offering a series of conversations with some really, really awesome Black women and talking about vulnerability in all different parts of our lives. So vulnerability in actual practice, vulnerability when it comes to money and business, and shame that gets in the way of Black women taking better care of themselves financially, vulnerability between mothers and daughters, vulnerability between sisters in family relationships, vulnerability, oh gosh, there's a few, vulnerability in our like self-care practices, like vulnerability in therapy, like why this is required in order for us to be closer to people, why it's required in order for us to feel safer in the world and to kind of access our highest self. So we have this whole amazing lineup. So if you're following me or following Not So Strong, get your tickets for that. We just released tickets a few days ago. That's Saturday. Some other things coming up. I am in the works of 2 book chapters. One book, just a chapter, not the book itself. I'm not doing a
Okay.
book, just a
I
chapter.
like it though. I like it.
One of the books is focused on having a more current or contemporary conversation about how Black women present in therapy and how to get their needs met in therapy. So whether that is college counseling, whether that is couples or family counseling, whether that relates to trauma, whether that relates to depression, some really, really great clinicians who are putting together this book that I don't know when it's going to come out, but we are submitting kind of all that stuff. So I'm also in the works of submitting a chapter that is specific to Black couples. I do a lot of work with Black couples.
Mhm.
And we are putting together a book specific to how to work with Black people in couples counseling. Because most of the theories out there, most of the psychological and marriage and family theories are whitewashed, they're white-based. They are for white, cisgendered, hetero couples. So we are offering a conversation and some examples of what couples therapy looks like when there is a partner who's got a mood disorder, when there's a partner who is, from another country, and we're kind of navigating cultural concerns, how to bring the Black experience into couples therapy, and to work with a therapist who can really honor the nuances of that when it comes to gender, when it comes to race, when it comes to ethnicity, when it comes to oppression, like all those things that show up in the therapy, but offering couples a really healing space to process how that affects their love. And how that affects their emotional intimacy, their physical intimacy, their child rearing, all that kind of stuff. So that is also in the works to be published either later this year or next year. And I'm probably running my mouth somewhere every week, so you'd have to
I
follow
like
me to see what's coming up.
you the hardest working woman in the business. So
I feel like it. I really do feel like it.
you do though. Like I'm like, okay, girl, I see you like a rapper right now. You just out here. You really are.
That's why I'm
Okay.
not running. I need to be taking my own advice.
This is true. But listen, like people love you and they want you. They want you to hear from you. So I gotta ask you. So there's one question I ask all of my guests, and I'm gonna ask you the same. Um, and so before we get into that, how can people get in contact? Because we talked about your grandpapa, we talked about, your practice. Like how can people actually get in contact with you?
Best way to find different speaking engagements that are going on is on my Instagram. So I am Dr. _ Ayanna _ A. So that's Dr. _ AYANNA _ A. And also find me over at Not So Strong. No spaces, no underscores, just Not So Strong. My website is www.ascensionbehavioralhealth.com. I always got to spell out Ascension because I'll be messing it up too. ASCNSION behavioralhealth.com. That has all information about my practice, how I work with couples, how I work with individuals. And I am redoing that website and my speaker website as well. So that's kind of also for upcoming events and how to work with me or bring me to your company or corporation. Those are the
Okay.
best ways to get in contact with me.
All right. And very last question, because you got to get out of here. What's making you happy?
What is making me happy? Ooh, that's a good one. Let me think about that. What is making me happy? I've been watching Power,
The TV show?
the TV show. I just started watching
Okay.
ago, and I'm about to wrap up season 6 tonight. This is what I do.
Okay.
So what makes me happy is I'm really happy about like pop culture and Blackness on TV, acting and all that stuff. So what's currently making me happy now is mindlessly digging myself into the drama of Power. That's helpful for me
Okay.
these days. What also makes me happy is seeing people willing to have a conversation about mental health, seeing people advocate for themselves. What's making me happy is not having to get dressed for a lot of things these days. Quite a relief.
Okay.
Make 3 less things to think about every day. And yeah, that's where I am today and right now.
All right. Well, she's Dr. Ayanna Abrams. She's a superstar. She's wonderful in real life too. Make sure you all follow her on social media. If you or someone you know who could use her services, please make sure you look out for Ascension Behavioral Health. I'll make sure you have a link in the show notes for all of these. Once again, you listen to the Neighborhood Watch podcast. I'm your host, King Williams. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe wherever you heard this podcast at. And also, if you haven't already, please sign up for my newsletter at IamKingWilliams.substack. That's SUBSTACK. So IamKingWilliams.substack.com. Thank you once again, Ayanna.
Yes, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right.